if you thought that they were going to go that long without trying to do something like that. Hey, I actually didn't think that they would do it, only because it's, you saddle them with that kind of a bill. You kind of want to make them twist a little bit. But then again, I guess when you have as deep a pockets as they do, $1.5 billion is really not a lot, and it adds insult to injury. And there you have it. We'll see what happens. I mean, that could go. We could learn about that very, very soon. Israelis leave shelters after Iranian attack of 180 ballistic missiles. IDF says preparing to hit back. Preparing to hit back. Now, this is pretty monumental because we're talking about direct exchange of missiles, not through proxies or anything else like that. We finally have a slugfest that is beginning between Israel and Iran. Here's a summary of what was posted on Zero Hedge. Iran says its action is concluded unless the Israeli regime decides to invite further retaliation. Prime Minister Netanyahu says Iran made a big mistake tonight and will pay for it. I mean, hey, listen. This is just the way it is, isn't it? Right? I can't stand. Common estimates show that the attack on Israel involved at least 180 ballistic missiles. The Pentagon says about 200, or about twice the size of the prior April attack. The waves of launches constituted the largest missile strike on Israel by Iran in history. IRGC is claiming that 90% of the missiles successfully hit their targets in Israel. They were confirmed strikes on the ground, but no official casualties reported. Israel's emergency authorities have lifted all restrictions, and people in Tel Aviv have emerged from bomb shelters and returned to the streets. White House says that Iranian attack on Israel apparently was defeated and ineffective. And Iran says 90% was great. Sullivan says there will be consequences for the attack, and the U.S. is consulting Israel on next steps. Oh, yes, I'm sure we're giving them a whole bunch of consultation. What's happening is Israel is telling exactly what they want from us and where to stand while they do what they're going to do. It's all a fait accompli. It's all fait accompli. That's all this is. Now, listen, I don't care about Israel, and I don't care about Iran. I don't care about any of them. I don't care about them. They don't care about me. They don't give a shit about me. And I can't afford to care. Can you afford to care? Can any of us afford this? If my will be done, innocent people wouldn't be getting killed, obviously. But our will means very little on this level of play. On that level of play, it's all fait accompli. Decision's been made, and we're going to pay for it. They just, I guess they might as well make us feel important by encouraging us to take a side along the way. That's really what it comes down to, at least what I see. And it's a pretty big day because all you hear about is saber rattling. And finally, we got these two hated rivals. We know how it's all been built up out there. They're finally coming to blows, and there we are. Scott Farkas and Grover Dill. That's who we are. We're Grover Dill, the toadies. The toadies with all of the bombs that everybody's using to kill each other. That's our biggest import these days. And export, I should say. Our export. 7:08. Let's get into it, shall we? We got Matt coming on in about, I don't know, maybe a little bit over 10, 12 minutes. And then we got the whole night. Second half, I'd love to take some more of your calls. And yeah, don't go anywhere, ladies and gents. Shall be a good one.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's ride!
Okay. It's really, really sick. Really, really sick that, you grow up around this stuff. You always hear it going on in the background. Middle East, peace to the Middle East, peace to the Middle East. It's just, oh, gosh. Gosh, I wish it could just take care of itself. I really can't stand anybody out there. Really can't. Really can't. Because it's been nothing but one interference in our personal lives after another. And the whole world is always brought to the brink. Now, do we ever go off the edge? No, so far, no. And that's why you can say, Frank, it's all there to keep you in line, fear and all that stuff. But you can only get into a pushing match for so many decades until somebody gets slapped in the face, and then all of a sudden you're slapping, and then you're punching, and then it's elbows and knees and biting each other's faces, and then, all the rest. Then there's disposal of the bodies eventually. But everybody's going to apply their own level of importance on this. And I just wish that we can opt out, but we can't. Because it's all us. We've been forced to invest in this over a long period of time. And there's so much else going on. And this is just the latest thing. You wake up today, you hear 200 missiles are dropping, and that's what's happening. But then you have this to tie it all together. Okay? Here it is. I got this. Kev Pasobic put this out. For the 82nd Airborne in North Carolina, this is madness. It's a text message that's been going around. If you're going to post this, leave my info out of it. I'm in the 82nd station in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We have guys in our unit with family in Western North Carolina that are trying to get to their family. Guys who are asking to put in passes to go help any way they can. They're all getting told no. Meanwhile, we got briefed that we have to be on standby in case we need to go help support the Middle East. The people stuck need to know that we're trying, but our higher-ups aren't allowing it. So this is naturally drawing a lot of attention and a lot of comparisons to Lahaina out in Hawaii. There's just so much here. And so the crazy thing here, too, is whenever you take, this guy, Amjad Masad. Greg Price yesterday put this out. Said yesterday Biden answers no when he was asked if he'll deploy more troops to the Middle East. And yesterday, Pentagon announces that more U.S. troops are being deployed to the Middle East. Somebody is running the country, and it's definitely not Joe Biden. He says somebody's running, and it's definitely not. There's definitely a typo in there. Definitely not Joe Biden. What the hell is it going? This guy, Amjad Masad, said, like Jeffrey Sachs recently said, quote, after the Kennedy assassination, there has been no president. There have only been factotums of the system. There's been a couple that have been a little bit more different than most because they've had more problems than most. There's one that they're still trying to kill, even though he wasn't perfect. But, I mean, it's just crazy. Truly is. Now, we also have a guy from Asheville, North Carolina, resident. He says that it's chaos after Hurricane Helene. Now, we had some people talking about the togetherness in certain neighborhoods and whatever, but that there is a lot of vandalism going on and things that are happening. That, again, we said the best of humanity, the worst of humanity comes out in times like this. And here's what he says. Listen to this.
So update right now, the biggest problem after Hurricane Helene is just you're not able to move. Some of my friends just try to go to Tennessee. The roads are completely blocked off. You're not getting out. We're trapped in. There's a lot of looters. Please stay safe. Stay inside. If you have a weapon, keep it on you because there are people intentionally sabotaging stuff. So over on I-40, there was some truckers coming in with supplies and medical stuff trying to help us. They stopped at a truck stop to get some rest. When they woke up, their tires were slashed. Nothing was stolen, just tires were slashed. The same thing is happening all over the place. People are intentionally just vandalizing stuff, not stealing, just vandalizing. And then there's looting happening in all the stores. I'll come back with an update in about 5 or 6 hours. Everyone stay safe.
So the vandalism, that's something weird. You hear about that. It's one thing where desperate people swiping bottles of water or whatever the hell else is going on. Actual price gouging going on out there with gasoline. Actual price gouging, not just responsible business owners trying to stay ahead of the curve of rising prices for everything and wanting to make just enough profit to keep everybody employed and to keep the lights on. But there's a lot of price gouging going on. People are reporting on that. So in the second half, by all means, we'll still take your calls. Something else I'm bringing back tonight, too. I'm bringing back the Inside Info hotline tonight. So in the second half, the Inside Info hotline is up. It's 914-369-1236. Do not call in on this number if you want to tell me about a YouTube video you saw, something on BitChute, a really hot piece of information you got on Telegram. Inside information is for firsthand information that the world needs to know. Okay? Something that's happening now that is imminent. So I like just throwing this up every once in a while because we've had some gems come through. So write this down, 914-369-1236. We'll be taking calls from the Inside Information hotline in a little bit. We've got our friend Matt. Our friend Matt from Cultivate, Elevate is going to be coming in a little bit. I also have this now from Georgia. Our friend Grace, really graceful. She's going to be coming back on the show later on this month. I think either the day before or the day after Roger Stone and Jeremy Ryan Slater on. But there's this going on here. A little bit more from all the chemical fires. She got this public safety alert at around 1:49 a.m. Eastern Time. Said Georgia Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security Agency, on behalf of the Environmental Protection Division, local area emergency, the due to Rockdale County Biolab fire. The EPA is monitoring air quality for chlorine and related compounds. Chemical levels are unlikely to cause harm to most people. She said that another one came around 3 a.m. And I also received an email from somebody who responded to a caller that we had from Georgia last night, who said in so many words, so many ways, that that woman has no idea what she's talking about. Everything she said is false. I want to do a super chat tonight to call her out, in fact. My phone is an iPhone 9, and pictures are not as clear as they could be, but there is still a red chemical haze hovering over Atlanta. I'm working 46 miles west of Conyers, and we are blanketed. So there's that going on. There's just so much happening with the North Carolina thing in particular. Obviously, the human toll is the most important thing to be focusing on right now. I always keeping track of what's going on in the background with, like the lithium stuff. That needs to be paid attention to, because whether we're all on the same page on how this would happen, whether or not NEXRAD radars are powerful enough to continue to steer a hurricane from one side of a country to another, or from, the south to the north. We have had people on the show, including Jim Lee. He's not the only person, but I keep asking him on it, say, hey, I'd love to see you go live on something like this and talk about it, because, I don't know. There could be so many different things that goes on here. And once the audience knows, once the world knows about HAARP, and they start knowing what to look for in the sky before an earthquake, once they start knowing about one radar system or another, and that gets out there, and then it's just everybody starts saying the same things, and there's no deviation from that. And all of a sudden, if you say, I think that this might actually be a compounding calamity, then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know. So you're walking on thin ice with all types of theories. But at the same time, the analysis that's been done on the lithium deposits out there, the quartz deposits out there, and just how much of the future technologically has really been staked on that small little part, Spruce Pine, North Carolina. It's really incredible. It really is incredible. And that's why I don't blame anybody for putting pieces together and wondering how much of this was really in some way, shape, or form steered, staged, and at one of the most impactful time of the year on an election year like this. I mean, it's just big. But until they stop with the recovery efforts, people are being found alive all over the place, thank God. Many others are not as fortunate. It's horrible to see and read some of the things coming out of there. So it's really just one of those phases in the game where you just got to hold steady and just pray that everybody's saved before we can start getting into the weeds here. Because what are we going to do? Get to the bottom of something? Make an arrest? All right. Well, let's bring on our friend. Let's bring on our guest for the night, and that is Matt. Matt from Cultivate, Elevate, Hidden History, Electroculture, Natural Cures, and more. Hard-working guy. He really is. He's always working, always putting great stuff out there. Another one that's fighting against a lot of the censorship that has just blanketed, even in places that you thought would be free from it. But he's here, and his appearances are always a fan favorite. Welcome back to the show, Matt. How you doing?
What's going on? How are you? Don't mind my name. It's just a different name. I'm on a different computer.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I knew it had to be you because you're the one that had the link tonight. To hell with it. So, man, okay. So, listen, what's going on there in Arizona? I know that's your stomping grounds right now. And how are you observing the world? Because there's so much happening at once. In fact, the last time you were on, we spoke in part about the massive flooding in Dubai. And of course, those clips were censored all over the place because we pointed out just very simply that these desert cities often seed clouds. But how are you reading things right now? Because there's a lot of weather chicanery going on again.
So there's a lot of things going on. It's 111 over here still. So it's really, really toasty. Sun feels very strange. That's for sure. The other day, the sunsets are real red and real orange. So that's really different. I mean, usually you get a little bit of that, but now you get this really different hue. But yeah, there's a lot happening. You had the hurricanes that, went up into North Carolina, that went through Florida, up through Georgia, up into North Carolina. And then we have a lot going on, like you were just talking about, all over the world. Then you have the port strikes, so there's a lot of craziness that's all happening at the same time. But over in Arizona, it's pretty toasty. And just, the typical, you're going to get a nice suntan. That's kind of what's going on over here. But other than that, it is a lot all at the same time to take in. That's why I tell a lot of people to spend a lot of time in nature, because it's needed with all of this craziness in which we're facing at the exact same time of, selection year.
It's true. It's true. And I want to find some time with you to talk about that toward the end of the show, about just the metamorphosis of society, especially since 2020. And I think one of the worst parts about the 2020 metamorphosis is that whole getting outside thing became a mandate. You cannot do it. It's hard enough with our dependence on technology for work, for recreation, for a diminished kind of social life, all that stuff. There's all types of traps and pitfalls with that, as you know. We were already going outside less and less, and then all of a sudden it became mandated to stay inside, to be a shut-in, to be a homebody, and it's very hard once everything starts to lift, all the mandates start to lift, but the craziness in the world continues to rise, and you feel like your link to the whole thing, to not be left out of that, is in the palm of your hand, and I don't know. There's a very weird. We seem to be a punch-drunk society.
Well, after the eclipse, which, if you remember, that was last week. The thing you should never look at, as they tell you, and that whole thing, which is funny, not to look at something that nature is doing. But after the whole eclipse, yeah, there's a different energy, And there was a different energy during that eclipse as well, too. It was very, very eerie, very quiet outside. And what's happening is they're playing on certain times of certain periods of energy. So in 2 days, we have the new moon coming, and then we go to the full moon, and the energy just gets cranked up from there. So if you think about these events taking place, they always take place on the new moon or around the full moon. They orchestrate a lot of different events, similar to last month with the whole Trump thing. That happened on the new moon, the first day of the new moon, which is ear got clipped. And then on the eclipse was like the second one or whatever allegedly happened. But a lot of these things take place on that because they're trying to tap into the emotional rise that occurs during the full moon. You have the most accidents you have the most accidents on the streets. You have the most babies being born. If people get a cut, they bleed the most. You have the most lunatics, which come out also during the full moon and that whole thing. So there's a lot of what they're tapping into, like it's called loosh, but like stealing your energy. And sometimes, like, for example, maybe like what we're seeing on social media might not even be real. And that's where I've kind of gone down this huge rabbit hole where I was looking at like visits on YouTube. And I found this app where I can look up like how many visits YouTube has. And it showed me that they had 74 billion visits. And I thought, 74 billion visits? There's allegedly 8 billion people on this realm. So where does the other 8 times the amount of visits come from? So then you start to go into bots, and then you start to go into thinking about how much stuff is faked. Mm-hmm. And then if me and you are commenting, this gets really weird. If me and you are commenting on a video, how many other bots are commenting on the video to like get that energy or like to like take from you? Because you see all these other comments and you're like, oh my gosh, but in reality, what if all those were bots? And that's where I started to realize that a lot of what we're living in is really just a simulation. And same thing with this hurricane. There was the same hurricane name in 1958. It was a Category 4. It happened on the exact same day, as this one that just happened. So it's like, are we just living in a simulation going through a loop? And that loop just keeps going in a perpetual cycle until you're aware. And then you see it all and you're like, mind blown.
Hey, I'm glad you said that about the metrics. We've had that conversation on the show actually recently. That there's no metrics you can trust. None. I think the best metric you can trust is what the hell's going on around you out there. When I hear about someone who learns about the show or runs into a fellow audience member in another state, I always figure that that's the best way. Anything that you can track that is human, it's got a heartbeat, because it's video game numbers. It makes absolutely no sense. Back to the sun, and then I want to get to the moon again. This is also over here. You were talking about how there's a strange quality to the sun in Arizona. This is the second year in a row now over here in New York that we have gone through a period of a week to 2 weeks where the sun is essentially delivered to us through a filter of what they call forest fire smoke from Canada. In my entire life, I mean, most of New York is forest. And, of course, then there's Canada above New York. There's never in my life did I ever see the pink sun and the choking, burning eyes that we had last summer, and then again this summer. 1 to 2 weeks, 2 years in a row, where we got the sun through this weird pink filter that they said it was from a far-off forest fire. I guess it's the first time a forest fire ever blew down this direction from California. But there was just there's some, like you said, I didn't smell burning lumber. There was nothing like that. Even though last year you can see the smoke, just kind of wafting by you. It was real. It was tangible. It was right there. And you were in the middle of a cloud of something. It was like a chemical accelerant. There was something going on. Everything burned. And I wonder how many people are going through things like that now, too, where it's becoming normal. Every year you get the week of the pink sun.
Well, I think that's, a lot of these anomalies are starting to happen like crazy. And I feel like it is either part of people waking up or they're starting to modify with the stuff that they're putting in the sky, the sunshine. And I was just talking about this the other day. I actually bought, so right behind me right here, this is a sun lamp, the old school UV sun lamp. It's called the Sunnet sun lamp from 1951. And it uses a mercury arc bulb. And it's really interesting. It gives a different spectrum. It's kind of like as soon as you turn on this lamp, It's like you're going through a portal back in time to 1901. So now why am I using this as an example? Well, if you change the spectrum of the sun with a different color spectrum, like we're talking about right now, and you dim that UV spectrum, because that's what they always talk about as the most dangerous and the one you need to stay away from and whatever. If you dim that spectrum and you change that spectrum, well, then people now are going to take on a different a reality, basically. As light bulbs change, different things take place. So you first had the mercury arc bulbs, then you had the incandescents, then you had the fluorescence. Now you got these toxic LEDs. And what's happening is as the lights have changed with the LEDs, you're also having the sun changing at the same time, and it's moving people into a distorted reality. Because it's exactly what you just said. I have never seen the sun do this except for last year. I've never seen the sun do this over and over again. Because what's starting to happen is it's a program. It's programming you into a new reality in which this happens all the time. And that's how, if you think about AI, transhumanism, robotics, all of these devices they try to sell you, what are they on? They got the new LED bulbs and all these different LED things, which are microchips. So if you're trying to transform society, you would start with the light of the sun or the light bulbs of the street. Another example was when they had those crime lights. If you remember that, they used to be like those red sodium vapor lights that they had all throughout the city.
Yeah.
They said that these lights would help fight crime. Well, what they found out was that red spectrum that was coming from them was actually making people more agitated and more crime. So if you think about it, if you're messing with the sun spectrum, you start to mess with everything else. And then if we think about 2020, you had all the lights go from the regular incandescent bulbs or halogens to LED street bulbs. And then those weird purple ones,
yes. I saw a couple of those both in New York and when I was driving around in South Carolina. I said, oh my God, it was happen. They would happen. And, prior to that, Matt, prior to the LEDs, which, it's unfortunate because they're making the incandescents harder and harder to find. And, I like that incandescent. Oh, there you go. What do we got here? Damn.
So that's purple. That's the UV spectrum. And what do you use this for? You use this to find scorpions. But now if you also put something into somebody's body that now glows in the dark, you also have now a spectrum in which you can find somebody with that as well too. This is where things get really weird. Like light spectrums, I've been going down the rabbit holes of radium and phosphorus and all these things and whatever else. And like you said, all of a sudden, all these purple light bulbs have been showing up all over the city. And you wonder why you would put something that has that purple spectrum unless you're looking for something, in my opinion, or trying to change, once again, the terrain and influence it in a different way. Because every color influences our body, our mind, everything. I mean, even the clothes that you're wearing, are influencing your mood. So if you start to think about this from everything light spectrum related, you change a little bit and then you kind of see what happens. It's kind of like when people now they go to, like, for example, the grocery store or a hardware store, and they're like, I can't stand it. The lights are driving me nuts. They're driving you nuts because they want to move people into shipping things to their house out of the stores and then moving them more into automation and robotics. So these lights become really, really aggravating, and then people can't sit in these places. So what do? They spend less money and they shop more online. So it gets wild with the lights.
Well, before the LEDs started becoming more and more common, there was plenty of stuff that I was reading about street lamps that were a little bit more on the fluorescent side of things and flicker rate. Even just the flicker rate of what was going on in the old, what was put out from the old tube televisions. You want to talk about anything that can put you into a highly suggestible hypnotic state, or to be able to adjust the flicker rate of one program or another to induce agitation. We know that there's plenty of active denial systems out there that can do this kind of a thing, that can just turn up the level of agitation of an entire city to try to bring people to the point of riot. It's possible. So there's plenty that the CIA has actually even declassified over the years about how sound waves have been used to bring about certain types of conditions in larger communities. What about the speaking on this though? especially since you're in Arizona. What about the UV laser theory with the Trump rally and everybody getting sick in that one particular section? Did you pay any attention to it?
So I heard about that. Now, what could have happened is that you have a cluster of cell phones. And this is what, a lot of people don't realize. Like when they go to a concert or a very large event, there are thousands of cell phones that are all pinging 5G, and that's the same thing of what caused the whole entire, 2020. And it was funny because I was actually just by you. I was in downtown New York City at Central Park, and I typed in antenna search, and I typed in the Natural History Museum that's down there in Central Park. And this is where it gets nuts, because that was one of the first places where the whole thing began. But with that whole thing, there are 9,000 antennas within 3 miles. And then you also have 500 towers within 3 miles. And it was funny because my phone, I still couldn't figure out the map and whatever else. But all of these towers and these things. But yeah, when you get these clusters of people together and then they all are like nodes, with each one of their phones, what happens is it's pinging. It's like cooking the area, just like you said, those defense weapons where they heat people up. They send signals and they heat people up. Same exact thing. You get a group of people together. You got 1,000 cell phones all pinging in through, the signal, and everybody starts to heat up. And then the body also heats up. And then people start to experiencing, loss of smell, loss of taste, hair loss, that whole thing, or dizziness. That's another one, or ringing of the ears, because those are symptoms of radiation poisoning. And it's interesting because when I talk about this topic, radiation poisoning was removed off of, the diagnoses or the diagnosis, whatever, in 1920s. As soon as that whole Kansas flu thing happened in 1919, they started removing microwave sickness or radio wave sickness because you can't sell people technology if they're bound to get ill. So with that situation, if you get a whole cluster of people together and they all got their phones, they all come down with the sickness, or people they're traveling all the time and they go through that little, goofy machine or whatever where they see you naked. They cook you before you get on the airplane. And then when they get back on the airplane again, they get cooked again, and then they come down with the sickness. And that's why people can opt out of all that stuff and whatever else. But these things, we look at this technology and say, well, it's not harming me. But it was also tested on a plastic dummy. So yeah, of course, there's going to be no results that say it was harmful because you're testing it on a plastic dummy. So, when you get these groups of clusters of people together, all those phones, ping, 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 ping. And I've seen this. People go to a concert, they're all messed up. And it's just because when you have a cluster of people, and also when we get into the whole thing, with Trump, he was the one who fast-tracked all of that technology. That technology had to have the regulation removed to be rolled out. So, there's so much in this, and you just start to unpack these things. And what I've started to realize is that nothing is by chance. When I go through all of this with you, and me and you have talked on these 3 or 4 times now and whatever else, but there's no such thing as chance anymore. I used to think it just happened by chance. No. It's intentional now. And I've started to see when you start to look at these events that take place, there's too many coincidences for it to just be considered chance. So that's my take on that.
Even when it comes down to, I know just recently now with this hurricane and everything that's being pulled, you want to talk about chance and everything. I often wonder about, whenever you learn about, for example, Operation Popeye or any of the weather modification, weather warfare programs that were, out there in whatever the hell it is, out like Groom Lake or wherever the hell it is, China Lake, down actually around near you. Where we had all of those underground explosions not too long ago, probably in around 2017, 18. That's where a lot of those Operation Popeye devices were put together. Of course, offshoots of old Tesla technology and whatnot. But when you think about that, then you go to, decades later with Katrina or any other hurricane that really just kicks the shit out of us. Obviously something that is a natural phenomenon, but when you learn about how these storms can be built up, you start wondering why you can't bring a category 4 down to a category 1 at least, if not being able to dissipate the whole thing altogether. In fact, there was a lot of that. Did you watch the latest what is it? The sequel to Twisters.
I think I've seen that.
Okay,
That's a
well,
movie, right?
It just came out recently though. It's the sequel to the one from the 90s. And
Okay.
I wanted to go watch it because, we're such big fans of the first one. And in this one, they actually take out the silver bromide, and they're talking about they give a lot of hat tips to the actual chemical procedures and methods to seed clouds. Only in this case, they're trying to come up with a new concoction to be able to dissolve tornadoes in the middle of the storm going on. I said, that's a really interesting concept, because I always wondered why the hell all these storms are allowed to, kick our asses at full strength when you can at least knock it down a couple of categories. So, when Helene rolls around, even if I can't explain what the hell's going on, and in some case, in some scenario, that this is just a compounding natural disaster where there was a lot of rain prior to, then this came around, and now you have bridges that are gone, roads that are gone. It's just an absolute mess. When you learn about things like the natural resources over there and all of the local pushback on people who, from locals that did not want any of these leases to expand for lithium mining or for quartz mining and stuff like that, and how important that is to the entire world economy from these little towns in North Carolina, it always makes me wonder, oh man, I mean, is this really just so happens? Especially when we were like for 2020, for example, all the civil unrest of 2020. It's very obvious that people were being rabble-roused, community organized into violence. But then for most people like me, you didn't realize just how far the rabbit hole went. Like when we started learning about the opportunity zones, how not only were people being pushed into violence and all this other stuff to be able to create panic and disorder in a very, very need to win kind of a year, but then you also see that there is another subplot where property value is being destroyed so it can be sucked up and for pennies on the dollar for whatever the hell the future is going to hold for that area. It's hard for me to discount anything or, as we go forward, because it just seems like all the stops are being pulled out right now.
Well, and I like that you said that, because yes, when you look at the lithium mines that are there, you look at the people who oppose the lithium mines who are also there, you also see a lot of people who are very independent. There's a lot of permaculture farms over there, all organic permaculture farms, like people who don't want smart cities, like don't want to be a part of any of that. They're very self-sufficient, and then you see this attack that hit on this town. And the other thing too is, like, this is the other part that, like, with hurricanes, these hurricanes are now moving. I remember this happened like 6 months ago. The hurricane went from Florida to New York up by you. And it's like, when do you know of hurricanes going all the way up, the country? Before, you usually hear it would hit the land and then it would kind of dissipate. And it's interesting that you were saying that too with the technology that they're using to whatever they're trying to do to our skies, and tax us afterwards. But the technology is supposed to be dissipating these things. Like, a lot of the technology was supposed to be there to disperse things. It was supposed to be for, like, getting rid of tornadoes and hurricanes and breaking up the eye of the hurricane. But it's interesting too, because when I was researching into this, I was looking up Project Cirrus, which is CIRRUS. And this was when General Electric went into a hurricane, dropped all this dry ice, and then just flooded all the surrounding towns when this hurricane was moving. And this was back in the 50s. So if you think about this one, as this one was going through, if they just dropped whatever they're using, chemical concoction, in that area, well, it just floods all of this area. And, the thing is like you said too, is when you look back in time, if we go by chance, I got so many books on the world fairs. I've gone through every single one now. 1876, I've gone through New York, I've gone through San Francisco, Chicago, I've gone through them all. And every single time with all of those, reset events, basically, there's always a fire, a great fire. Then there's like a hurricane, then there's a flood, then there's a stock market crash, and then there's an epidemic. And I found this old book that went through Chicago 1893 and how there was a stock market money panic in 1894. Then all of a sudden they poisoned the people and there was an epidemic. And then all of a sudden there was this great fire and they burned all the buildings and things like that. And I started to see this same thing and go, oh my gosh, once again, we're in a loop. And how long has this loop been going on for? Because even when I was over by you, you look at the buildings and we are on this floor, we're on the first floor. But when I was walking around downtown New York City, there's levels below. So who built this? And then I went to find photos, and I could send them to you as well if you want. But 1882, 1883, New York City, when they had this like great blizzard. The weird part about this great blizzard is there's nobody walking around. There are these massive buildings all over the place, and there's no people. And I found all these different pictures of big buildings. They even say like for lease, buy the land, for sale. And I'm sitting there going, well, whose are these? And what was this a reset in which we didn't see? Now, as I've gone through my books, there's these gaps of time that don't make any sense. Like the 1800s, from 1776 to like the 1850s, there's like this weird time frame where in 1776, they already have electricity and they're talking about it in one of the light books that I found. And then all of a sudden they don't have it. They're like living in this, like, like the Stone Age, if you want to go with that, just to make it simple. And then through 1850s, there's all these like wars and things and these resets. So it makes me wonder, how long has all of this technology been around? How long have all of these simulations been taking place? How long has all of this been going on? Because this technology is not new. Like even what happened when we talked about everything that happened in Hawaii with the fires, they can use the energy of the hurricane to create a fire over here, kind of like the whole 9/11 thing. There's a lot of stuff with that, with static fields. And I've done a lot of research into that. So it makes you start to wonder, are we living in Sim City? I don't know if you ever played that game, but I played it as a kid. You would just push a button and you would just, build up your little town, put your fire department, whatever. And then you're like, up fire, up hurricane, alien invasion, all of these things. And it made me start to realize that like a lot of these patents too on like the weather situation, they all get approved. If they're like a national security threat, like the 1951 Secrecy Act, that's supposed to protect these patents and hide all of them from us and whatever, why are all these ones on the weather approved? Why are they just on Google? Like someone can just go and create this technology and start messing with the weather. So, I started to realize all of these like flaws in the things. And like you said, after an event takes place, there's scarcity, there's looting, there's crime, and then there's somebody trying to buy up everything on pennies on the dollar. And these insurance rates are going through the roof, and then people are moving out. And as soon as they evacuate their land is no longer theirs. There's a little loophole in there. So, you see all of this and go, okay, I look at all of these things and analyze these things and go, there's nothing by chance, because I'm seeing the same stuff that I'm seeing in the 1880s, 1870s, and everything else. And I'm seeing it again now. But the only reason I'm seeing it is because I'm aware of it today. And I think that personally, the pandemic, like 2020 and this whole thing, has just opened up that rabbit hole to show us of how much stuff has been repeating for so long, but we just weren't aware because honestly, we didn't have the internet. Like we couldn't find, let's say, books or something with a different narrative. We had to listen to a teleprompter or Operation Mockingbird or some just Muppet just talking and whatever else. But we can do research like me and you have done and see a different side and go, wow, and then we can look for counters like Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster, Trevor James Constable, etheric weather engineering, and all these different devices which could be built, which also can counter what they're doing.
I got to ask you a question about the communication aspect of this, because that's something that I've been really harping on, big time, but I'll save that for just a little while from now, because there's other things you're saying and topics that we brought up in the past. Like, for example, when you came on and we spoke about Tartaria and we spoke about the orphan trains, all those very strange little footnotes in history that maybe some people learn about, Coney Island, these babies in incubators and all that stuff. Very, very odd little, things there. And maybe some people have some alternate explanations for them all. But these are all.
Which, if I may intervene,
Yeah.
I actually found out that the first baby incubators were shown at the 1902 or 1903 St. Louis World Fair.
Okay, so then here you go.
Then they moved to Coney Island. So and it's interesting because the same design of Coney Island is the St. Louis World Fair. So I just wanted to throw that out. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I see. I like these little tidbits here because it's one of those things that whatever the hell we're talking about at the time when it comes to that, it's usually attached to a theory about some sort of a timeline split. There's just something that happens to our reality almost. It's not even just about there's a board of executives that is making the decision to trigger a mud flood and to say, okay, well, this part of the country has to go, and let's slowly over the course of a few generations make sure that nobody even remembers that it was there, and build a whole new world on top of it. Some of this feels really kind of interdimensional, supernatural in a way, and I've been finding some really deep conversation being held all over the internet about how nothing has really been the same since 2020, and this almost like a Mayan calendar kind of a comparison of what's going on there. Obviously, nothing happened to the physical world in December of 2012, but many people suspect that perhaps there was some sort of a jump off point spiritually or something else that happened around then. But there is this the more obvious analysis that can be made about 2020 and the trauma and the media programming and the government coercion and censorship and all that stuff that can obviously be made. Oh, well, that was the story of 2020. But do you think the change in humanity from that point on was deeper than just what the government and the NGOs of the world have been able to do to us psychologically? Do you think that there was a much more deeper existential change?
I would say yes. And the only reason I would say that is because I've seen this on social media too, and I've seen a lot of this, and I've seen this in person too. Like when I was out in upstate New York, we stayed at this beautiful ranch. It was like 50 acres. They had horses and everything. And when I was talking to the fellow who owned the ranch, he knew everything. Like everything me and you were talking about, like every single thing. And I thought, I'm like an hour north in the middle of the woods. I'm in, a Bear Mountain. Like I'm in the middle of the woods. There's nothing here. It's
damn,
top of the mountain.
You were right near me, man. We should have hung out. What the hell?
I didn't know. I didn't see that. I thought about it, but then it was such a fast trip, but it's beautiful up there.
Yeah, it is.
And I hiked up there, and I saw, which people want to look into old world, the Arden House, which is that 100,000 square foot house that's just in the middle of the woods. Like that was built in 1893 type of thing. So it was interesting, but once again, when we're talking about the shift, I think that everybody or a majority is actually seeing it. And I also started to think the other thing that changed everything is the people having the ability to the internet. And I know it sounds crazy because if you think about the internet, like they wanted to have like the web, they wanted to like confine the people type of thing and like confine the information. But what I really think has happened is it's gone like the opposite way. It's like the information has just now exploded, and then it's made people hungry for the truth and us finding the truth and looking for the truth and getting into it. Because like even, like we said, we've had many talks about the world fairs. I started collecting all the books and going through all the timelines because I was like, I want to know each one. I want to know what technology was presented. I want to know that Tiffany and Co. started with the World Fair. I wanted to know that Coca-Cola and Hershey's came around during the World Fair. And I started seeing this and going, okay, these are interesting things that have just started during that time. But what I've started to notice is, like I was saying, with the access to the internet and then people then seeing things in PDFs and books and videos and things like that, I think that there's been a monumental shift. And I don't think there's a way to go back. And it's interesting because John Kerry, he's a scumbag, but he had a talk about how the internet goes, the whole free speech and the internet is a threat to democracy.
Yep.
And I heard that and I thought, interesting way that you turn that, because it's a threat to tyranny is what it is, because people can see another side. But you threw the democracy in there so that like people feel good about themselves and whatever. But it's really a threat to tyranny. And it's the ability for people to see everything. Like me and you can sit and diagnose something from 900 different angles and still say maybe that's not even correct. but at least we can have a conversation about it. We couldn't do that before. And I think because there's so many people doing what me and you are doing right now, just talking about it, that people have started to see. And even with this hurricane situation, there's no help. Like there are just people helping people. There's actually no help. There's no Red Cross. There's no National Guard. There's no nothing. They were slashing the tires of the truckers who were trying to come in and help people. Like there's crazy stuff going on. So you sit there and go, oh, okay, that's how it is. So if I'm in an event like that, I know what's going to happen. And that's where I think, the shift happened with 2020. Like I'm never going to forget, the stickers in the grocery store, like the stupid stickers, like to tell people to go directions, to stand 6 feet. Like I remember, I'll never forget, I was at the store and the guy's like, you got to stand on the sticker. And I was like, what does this do? You don't even know what it does. You're just making up stuff and going to throw those plastic barriers in the ocean. But, you just sit there and go, I'm not going to forget that. And I think when the 1919 Kansas flu thing happened, back 100 years ago, people went against it, but they fought with guns. People shot each other and did all kinds of things and whatever. But the thing is there's not enough to spread the information, because at that time, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and their control over media, things aren't going to get out. You're not going to see that there's this much resistance. And I think personally, what the internet has showed me is there's a lot more resistance than what it seems. But if you broadcast that there's only like a couple people, defending their rights and whatever else, then it makes it look like it. But in reality, from the flip side of 2020, I think there's a lot more. And like I said, I've met a lot of people. And even if, they even got 20% of what happened in 2020, their mind has changed forever. And you really think that that is such a crucial, of the event, that it will never go back to what they used to think.
Last night we were actually stringing together some of those sound bites from John Kerry to Bill Gates, who was he was talking. I mean, we listened to him first and how he was, in his skeevy little way, wondering if there was some kind of an AI program that would be able to monitor, billions of interactions at a time to make sure that people weren't saying things that would somewhere down the line inhibit somebody from doing things like getting a vaccine. They wanted to make sure that that's the most important thing there. It's okay, free speech is fine. Free speech is fine, but we don't want people to be able to consider unfiltered information and make decisions that might be in contrary to what we want for their lives. Same thing with John Kerry, and then of course Hillary Clinton. She put the capper on the whole thing there too. And it was big, and I'm glad you made that point. It's the same point I made. He was trying to say that the wide open internet and freedom of information, even if the information is bad, just the freedom to be immersed in it and to be adult enough to start picking through things using discernment and actually being able to go and fact check and source material and research and be an independent thinking mind again, which we, over generations, we gave all that up to newscasters that we thought were like extensions of our family. Walter Cronkite was not. Dan Rather was not extensions of our family. They were Mockingbird agents. Like you were saying there. So it's so incredible to see them get all bent out of shape, and as if this is a threat to democracy, but when it's really a threat to their own monopoly on information. And this is what I wanted to bring up right here. There's this other glaring issue that's going on with the destruction of these coastal towns and everything that we were discussing last night, and that is communication. This storm, especially in North Carolina, all throughout the Gulf and up, but North Carolina got hit particularly hard, has been very unwelcome reminder that in a flash, we can have millions of people at a time isolated with no way to communicate at all. And in the background, we have all of these steady calls to address the free flow of information online, alongside of a trend of media consolidation that we see with George Soros's Open Society gobbling up hundreds of local stations, which right now in many parts of North Carolina, the only link people have to the outside world are local radio stations. Now I think people understand the plot there. But, talk a little bit about going forward, communication, because I know even you in normal working order, you fight off, you're trying to find a way to circumvent a lot of shadow banning, even on places like Telegram, which used to be a safe haven for people like us.
Yeah, the censorship is out of control. I mean, most people don't realize how much they can censor you. They can turn off your internet. They can do a lot. I faced a ton in the last 6 months, just sharing stuff that's just government documents. Like I honestly, I'll give you the source, I'll give you the book, I'll show you the book. You could take a picture of the book, like you can do whatever you want. I'm more than happy to show it. But they try to block a lot of things. But like you said, yes, a lot of people's ability to talk to each other was disconnected. There was a radio station I shared on Telegram where people could listen in and they could be able to hear what was going on. And it was just an online radio station because that was the only way to have, like you said, communication. And I was just reading, I think it was about an hour ago or 2 hours ago, that the FCC shut down Starlink for all the people who had Starlink. So then you're sitting there thinking, going, okay, so people need an ability to communicate or the internet at that time, or just to be able to be connected, and you disconnect it. So it's like, okay, we have to be aware of all of these things. Like when you're put in a situation, you have to be aware that everything that you think you have might not work. So you should be in the best state to think, okay, if I was in a situation, what would be good for me? I could have food, I could have water, I could have a backpack full of all the necessities that I need. Maybe some, you can even have some little Band-Aids or something if you got wounded or whatever. A life vest, really important, because I've realized like the water thing is a huge one, especially anybody who's next to water, because they can just move the water onto your land. And there was an example of this actually in Katrina, where the guy had his house on a raft. And when Katrina came in, he was on the news and he was like, I told you guys this whole time to just put your house on the raft. Like we live next to the water, but having a raft is very crucial. I saw a couple people with some boats. Having ammo, definitely. I'm not going to even attest to not even having ammo and defend yourself, because now what's happening is there's all these looters coming in. And I thought this is really interesting. The whole town is, towns are underwater and it's horrible what's happening to the people. And the looters are coming in. And you sit there and think, are people being paid? And you just mentioned George Soros, who George Soros pays a lot of people to do a lot of things. Similar to, like you said, if he owns the radio stations now, nobody can hear what's going on because they're in the dark. So, people can also look into get like those, like we were talking about before, those ham radios, and know your neighbors. Like, I think that's one of the most important things too. Like a lot of people live places, and if you don't know your neighbor, or you can go to them if there's ever, like, for example, by me, when the power was out, because we had these fires, whatever, in Arizona and whatever, the power was out, I could talk to my neighbors. They maybe know what's going on. I talk to my other neighbor. You should be really close friends with the people who are around you. And if other people start coming in, you should be aware of who those people might be, because they're usually, like I've learned with Red Cross, which is owned by the Rockefellers, they're not there to help you. FEMA is just there to give you some jabs in your arm, and probably take your property away and whatever. But, when it comes to situations like this, you should be aware that if you were put in a situation in which you had to survive, think of all the things that you would have. And you can build just a little kit, so that it's always with you. I mean, and I've talked about dragon's blood with healing wounds before. You could keep some dragon's blood with you if you wanted to put on wounds, if you had open wounds and things like that. But there's all these things that you could have as a specific kit, so that if anything were to be a situation, you're aware and you have it with you. And extra batteries are always good. That's another one too, so that you have an ability to charge something, and this is what a lot of people were suffering from too. They don't got any power. They don't got a generator. The generator's covered in water, so when you think of water, you have to think of different situations. When you think of fires, you have to think of different situations. And then obviously a hurricane, different situations. But all these different events, as I've seen, have continued to escalate. So people should be aware, and I'm not trying to put fear into people's hearts, but people should be aware and always be prepared, because now I saw a video, I think it was Atlanta, Georgia, their grocery store, there's like 1 million people. The line is all the way down, like 3 miles down. And it's like, if you just prepared a little bit, had something just in case, at least you're good for time being, or for whatever it has to be to ride it out. And we don't know, like you just said with this event, how long it'll take for things to get even turned back on. They were saying now it could be 4 to 6 weeks. I had a friend who was in Telegram who said it was like 4 weeks So it's like, imagine now not having things. And if people have family members, I always say, check on them. You know, like your grandma or grandpa or mother or whoever's living out there, you should be checking on them all the time, making sure everything's okay. But it's about this close connection. And I tell people, and we had that talk too, but like get people's cell phones numbers. Like, don't be just Instagramming people, you know, and just sending each other messages on a platform that wants to block you from talking to each other. Get your cell phones. You even get a landline, you know, like just plug it into your wall. You can still do that. There's still abilities to communicate, you know, and I think this is a situation or an event in which people shouldn't take lightly, because even 2020, you know, they said 14 days, you know, they're like, oh, 14 days. Yeah, that lasted like 3.5 years. So, you know, we just have to look at it from every angle, but always be prepared, you know, and just think of, if you don't have this resource, how you would have this, and if you don't have that, how you would have that, and try to plan it out. And most of the people who I saw I was looking at the ones they were prepared. They're like, we're good, you know, we're helping other people. And then if you do have resources, you can help other people too. You know, it's just when you don't have anything, you're going nuts. And then once again, when you're in chaos, as all events, you're not using logic. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. Like, when all that chaos is happening, to try to ground yourself so that you can think straight, to go, okay, what am I going to do, and where can we go from here?
Yeah, that's why when I think about October surprises, I was talking about this early last week. To summarize it, I said I really don't believe that there are any electoral surprises that are possible anymore. That anyone who everyone who is voting, who is actually going to vote, knows who they're voting for. And nothing is going to change that. It doesn't matter what the hell happens. It doesn't matter. The kind of things, the loyalty oaths that people have taken so far because they believe the other side is absolute Satan. Nothing's going to change it. What I do believe, though, about October surprises, which you talk about COVID. I mean, COVID was an October surprise that happened in February. You know, that had to be stretched out to make sure that November went according to plan. I mean, it's just nuts right here. But what we are talking about is trying to gauge just how many things are going to happen that would be counted as life-altering events. And already right now, on October 1st, we have still dealing with the fallout, a very real fallout. Still, many lives are in danger with this big storm. There's a food fight in the Middle East that's getting worse. We still have Russia-Ukraine thing going on, chemical fires breaking out here and there. The entire mayoral, I have not even been able to talk about this since coming back from my little getaway this past weekend, because so many other things have happened. But pretty much the entire mayoral administration in New York City is under indictment right now. Yep. And then and now on top of that, this major labor strike. I mean, those are October surprises right now, and it has nothing really to do about swaying an election. It has a lot more to do with altering day-to-day life for people. So that's just I don't know. I don't know how you see all that as a collective statement, but I think we're on the same page.
Well, a lot of the strikes, you know, when you go back into the strikes and you go back into the whole formations of the union, you know, the union started with Karl Marx and Lenin and that whole thing, and the beginning of communism and communism trying to get its way into things. And they used a lot of violence and a lot of things against the people so that they could get things to happen. So if you think about the port strike, this is, you know, if you want to get into it, like the guy who I watched who was, you know, doing the speech, they say he's got a 7,500 square foot house and he's got like a 75-foot yacht and all kinds of things. He's living large. So you sit there and go, well, why today? This is what I always like to ask. Like you said, it's October. And, for next year, you have the SPARS pandemic, you know, of October. That's what it says in the document. So it's like, why do they always pick this month? But even with the starting of this, you know, the labor strike, you look at this and go, why are you picking now? Are you picking because it's going to be wintertime? People will be cold. They need food. They need resources. Why are you picking now? Like it's like you said, the pandemic's been over for a while, and you could strike all that other time. And I do know, like the ports are slower. You know, FedEx took a big cut. You know, UPS took a big cut. Like I know everything about what's going on with shipping. There's huge drops in what's actually moving through, like, you know, the whole world actually. Like it's dropped tremendously. So you sit there and think, why'd you do it now? You know, and it's interesting because it can cause a lot more shortages. And also, too, you just had the Federal Reserve, which we've talked about, Rockefellers, Rothschilds. They dropped the interest rate, said the economy's good. But then you look at this and go, wait a minute, that's going to flip it. That wasn't projected. But they're all tied together. Like they pretend that they don't know each other, but they all know each other. So you sit there and go, well, why are you trying to do an event like this? And my thing with this, just for people, because the guy who said it said some really interesting things. He said by 4 weeks, you can cripple a country. And I thought it's interesting that the words used are very interesting. But I thought, well, if that's the case, people should just be stocked with things. You don't have to be stocked with crazy amounts of things, but just have things, just to be, like I said, just be safe. That's it. You don't got to buy 800 rolls of toilet paper because you're just going to throw them away. But things that actually might be tangible, like food or water or something, it's always good to be. But with that, it's just an interesting thing. And when I look back in time, I look back at like the 1929 Great Depression and the 1933 Agriculture Adjustment Act by FDR. And you have the Depression, which is orchestrated by bankers, where they cause deflation and they just wreck the economy and everything goes upside down. And then you have 1933 FDR with his AAA Act, where he pays farmers to destroy food because he says abundance is a burden. And there's no way of having an economy if you have abundance. So if we think about this event, well, you can get prices to go up. You can short things. You have commodities, which also took place in 1933. That's when they came out. And so now all of a sudden you can play games and you could make a bunch of money off the people too. Because as things spike or the price of steel goes up or the price of this, people bet on those things and then they make a whole chunk of change. So I look at it like there's a lot more happening with it, but also people should be aware and not just aloof, because a lot of the things we go through sometimes might be just nothing and you just go whatever, but it's important to just be aware and just pay attention. You don't got to give it all your attention, but just pay attention.
It's abundance is a burden. What a line right there. If you really had a group of people that truly cared about, you can't. I would never put that on to somebody to say, oh, he truly cares about the people. You can't care about 330 million people. You can't actualize all those type of people. You can't know, but you could care about a principle that you share in the benefit of, as the same as those however many hundreds of millions, tens of millions of people, depending on where you're coming from. And that is, in a time of stress, you would want people to create abundance, and you want to encourage people, hey, start becoming more self-sufficient on the local level. We need to be able to if I was a part of a company, or if I was running a country or something like that, and there was some moment of stress that we're starting to get into like austerity measures and all that stuff, the first thing I would do was decentralize, because of course I don't care about accruing any personal power. I don't think that way. So I would actually decentralize at that point and encourage people to start feeding each other on the local level, to become less and less dependent on one city on the East Coast organizing the food and the stamps and the cheese for the entire country. It's so incredible when you hear those stories throughout history of farmers being ordered to destroy crops, to destroy cattle, to dump milk, excess milk into rivers instead of just giving it to people. And I'm not one to say, hey, give this milk out for free. I'm just saying it's better to give milk to people to consume than to dump it in a river. So it's just it's always the intent has always become so very clear. And I think that's what's the hardest part about for people that start getting into these topics and digging around into things that people like you are always bringing to the fore, is that you don't want your mind to go there. You don't want to believe that there are so many evil initiatives, the anti-human initiatives that are at play right now, when really, what does it matter if small families all throughout the American countryside or the American suburbs or whatever have some stability in their life? What does that really take away from the biggest, most powerful people on the earth? that there are some people in the country that they had a quiet night together and their lives haven't been pressured in some strange way. It really is a daunting kind of a thing to consider.
Well, and like you just said, when FDR did that whole situation, people were struggling. They were starving. So it's like, why would you create something that makes it more difficult for them to have food during a time in which they're starving? And the more I would go into, the Federal Reserve and Eustace Mullins, I highly recommend Eustace Mullins and for people to check out his work and the books that he's written. But when you get into it, the Federal Reserve, that's the start of it all. That's the start of income tax. That's the start of screwing the people. That's the start of, the medical system. Like it all starts and stems from this control arm that started taking over, and then it started taking the electors, the people who were up there, because they had two plans. They had the Federal Reserve Plan, which was Woodrow Wilson, which was the Democrat, and then they had the Aldrich Plan, which was also the Federal Reserve Plan in 1913, and that was the Republican. So you see both these sides and go, wait a minute, what? You're both doing the same thing. And that's where, when that plan was pushed through, then they started changing things. Then they started bringing taxes. And then they started doing all this, like what the FDR was doing and things like that. And I started to realize that if you start to flip everything that they tell you, everything that they try to tell you they're going to do for you and whatever else, you really realize it's just the opposite. And we've gone through this many times. And this is why, like, most people don't know, like, number one, income tax before World War II went up to like 85%. So when you go into like, saving you and protecting you, 85%, like I don't know, nobody's going to be able to survive with that. Number two, the voting, when people were voting, dropped down to like 25%. Only 25% even casted a vote, because at that time, what you just said, the morale was being destroyed. And if you're not aware of these things, then you fall for all these games that they're trying to put us through. And that's why I try to bring the awareness. It is tough and it is a lot to take in, but there are people who are at the forefront, like Eustace Mullins and other people who put this information out so people are aware. Because what has to happen, and it's exactly what you said, is there has to be two timelines. And if we keep staying at this timeline, I mean, you're just getting literally shafted over and over again on this side. And on this side is a different world in which people are trying to take back their independence. And I think, personally, if more people shifted to this side, then it would change things very quickly. Because it's as simple as everybody saying no. It's as simple as saying, I don't want to pay property taxes. I don't want to do this. It's as simple as that. But it's just a lot for people to take in, because they have to get rid of some comforts that they currently have that might be okay for them. And that's where I think a lot of this has happened. And another flip side, so that people can see the other side, is like the stuff that's going on in Haiti right now, which actually got $10 million worth of donations, and Red Cross just kept it all. They never got a single dollar for that. But they also have no government. They just got gangs running it. So if I think and I look at the difference, you have a little chaos over there and there's just no government, no nothing, but then you have a different version here. And if you're not aware, then you kind of get duped. And that's been my whole message. And maybe that's why I get censored a bunch and whatever else. But the whole thing is I want the truth to be out there so people can see that these are loops that have been going on for a long time. And until we're paying attention to the loop, we can't break the cycle. We just keep doing the loop.
Yeah. And when you think about the status quo for the system, this kind of a message is just as dangerous as someone who's out there trying to organize violent revolution. Because, of course, violent revolution is actually preferable for the people in charge, because that is an irrational reaction that can be put down with even more violence. And now there is precedent and reason to go out there and demonize your entire movement. But this is the flip side as to why people like you are often jumping over unreasonable hurdles to get a message like that out there, because it's peaceful, it's practical, and I think it's a lot more in line with our nature. I have a couple of really quick questions for you from the audience, but one first from me. Since we were talking, one thing came up for me, and that's the moon cycle, the moon calendar. We were talking about the sun, how it's not the same anymore. There's different things that are being normalized over the years now, especially over here, and what you were saying over there. But what about the moon calendar? We talked about this on this show. I think the last time I had this conversation was about 2 years ago or more. The 13-month calendar, the 28-day calendar. Have you ever organized your life by that? I know some people who just swear by it. It takes a little bit of time, but they believe that, especially if you live within circadian rhythms and just trying to get your body naturally rising and rising and falling with the sun and the moon and just nature and all that, there's nothing like it. So I have to ask you about it.
So I follow the 28-day cycle. I pay attention to it every single time it runs through. I mean, even when I was texting you or we were talking, like I was setting it up for the new moon. But, that's the thing is because I've realized is that's how our bodies naturally work. We have a 14-day cycle of high energy. We have a peak at the full moon where the lunatic, everybody goes nuts and whatever else. And then people make a bunch of babies. And then you have a 14-day down cycle. And that's the calming, regenerating cycle, or even part of fasting cycle as well. But yeah, when you start to pay attention to the moon, you really see the same cycle again and again. And I always tell people, just watch the moon, like just pay attention. You'll always see the same cycles, like from the new moon to the full moon, you'll see all this craziness. People be getting text messages from people they didn't even talk to in 10 years, whatever else. Full moon ends, they don't get a text message. They completely vanish. And if you just see this, go to the mall, same thing. You want to go shopping, mall's completely packed. You go, after the full moon, and now it's the rest time, mall's empty. And it's like you can hear like the crickets, like there's no sounds. But what I started to realize is our energy levels work on those spectrums. And these people or things, whoever's orchestrating, whatever they may be, and whatever, they also are running on the cycles. Like the events take place on cycles so that they can also harness that energy. Because think about it. If me and you are all charged up for 14 days, that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of essence. Like that's a lot. Like if I'm giving all my energy to this, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm going to be run down. But these things, which are harvesting through these devices, because that's what these screens are really doing, but harvesting that energy, they're taking in that. So they get a boost of energy through this. So when it comes to the moon cycles, it's really important to pay attention. And we just had this really, really large amount of energy because of the eclipse. Anytime these eclipses come through, and my whole theory now on this, and I watched the last one with my bare eyes. I watched this one with my bare eyes. I started to realize they don't want people to watch these. Like they tell you, wear these goofy DuPont glasses because it's downloads. Think about it. Think about like if you experience a download like the 2020 thing, but imagine if you experienced it every couple months, because the eclipses happen like every couple months. Imagine that download of information that is constantly occurring. The other interesting thing is when this barrage that's happening in the sky starts to happen, it always usually happens on the new moon and the full moon. What are you trying to block from us? And I think just Earth is doing its thing. I think there's a beautiful natural resonance. Nathan B. Stubblefield talked about this all the time. Tesla talked about this all the time. And they're trying to diminish that. But inevitably, the human essence or the aura is all waking up and taking in this and tapping in. And if you get into gardening, which we've talked about a billion times with electroculture, a lot of people follow the moon. They see that the full moon is the best time to harvest, the best flavors, the sap is at the perfect ratio. So if plants are on this cycle, so should we. And the more I've started to tune in and pay attention and go, okay, these next 14 days, I'm cranking out as much as I can. These 14 days, I'm going to rest. I am the most efficient that I could be because I'm just following the cycles of the moon that are just happening every 28 days or 28.5 days.
And it feels that you get into a flow. You felt immediately that you got into a zone, like you had almost merged into a lane of a highway that you've been trying to get onto, and that was a determining factor, just being able to link up with the moon.
So I just started paying attention to when the most craziest podcast that I did, and I noticed that on the full moon or just before the full moon, they would just go bananas. And I thought, this is interesting. It's always happening like the exact same time. And there was a guy who was doing, he did like shows. He did like music, like rock shows or whatever it was. And he had this theory where he said he would never do a rock show after the full moon. And I was like, why would you not do that? And I started paying attention and I would see these differences. But yeah, we're really, as much as we don't realize, we just follow the rhythms, and they're trying to do all this nonsense to mess up the rhythms that are naturally occurring in our body. And the more we start to pay attention to them and kind of just stop and like literally just pay attention, the more you start to see, wow, this repeats every single month. And then this repeats, 13 months, like you just said, per year. And you see the same cycles that happen every single time. And it's just going in repeat. And the more we tap into that and we start to pay attention, the better we can be and the better our energy can be, our brain, our stamina, everything, because it cycles. Versus if you go the opposite and you try to, like, I don't know, dig a ditch when it's like the end of the moon cycle and you're tired and exhausted, you're not going to have any energy. But during the full moon, you got all these people who are out doing all kinds of crazy things.
It is crazy.
And they got tons of energy. So you should be doing a ditch, on the full moon, not at the end of the cycle.
That's it. Well, listen, there's always so many interesting things to consider when you're on. And you got to come on more than once every 3 to 4 months. I know that's mostly on me. I just got to send the invites out. I need some topics. And we always work out something nice. This was great. We hit a lot of things tonight. Before we leave, please, I have your cultivateelevate.com linked in the description of this episode. I hope people click through to it. But why don't you give your alternative health care business a little bit of a plug, because you've got some great products. I just love the packaging alone, but wherever your attention goes, I know it's going to be quality. So let everybody know about your website.
So they can find us on cultivateelevate.com. We have a whole bunch of different superfoods on there. We have pearl powder, dragon's blood, shilajit, and all these beautiful mushrooms. And basically each different superfood addresses meridian lines of the body to help restore balance. This is how they used to do it back in the 1900s and the 1800s. They would address meridian lines and help them repair and restore. Pearl powder, which you're showing on the screen, has been just going bananas. That's why we have 3 different versions. We have the big pearl, we have the smaller pearl, and then we have capsules. But pearl helps with the eyes, it helps with the skin, the nails, the connective tissues. We've had people with eye floaters, they're gone, like completely gone after using pearl powder. We have people going to the eye professionals, and their vision going backwards, the eye professional going, what's going on? Pearl powder, skin issues, brain fog, sleeping issues, restless leg syndrome. Pearl is pretty magical because of the selenium, the magnesium carbonate, and the 2% structured water. What is being cooked the entire time while we're using all these devices and whatever else? The water in the eyes. There's water in there. And the pearl helps to help hydrate. And also in the body too, our water is being taken away. That's why people are dehydrated all the time. They're not sick, they're usually dehydrated. But pearl powder is really magical for that. Shilajit, great for pulling out heavy metals and detoxing. And then dragon's blood is the original Band-Aid. They used to put a little dragon's blood on a person's wound and it would start to help them heal. They also used it on people's gums to help with recessive gums. And it's tree sap. That's all it is. It's just beautiful tree sap to help heal. But everything that we put on there is just to help address a different pathway. And if anybody has any questions, they can send us messages and we'll gladly help them. But all my things are just trying to put the information out. And it's interesting that, with you showing my website, I actually did a search where I did Cultivate Elevate. And I went on Google, I went on DuckDuckGo, I went on Quant, and I went on Yandex. And I looked at all the different results that came up. And Google has pretty much just wiped all of my stuff. The YouTube is just non-existent. All my videos, even the things that come up, they don't. But then if I go on DuckDuckGo, I can see them all, which is interesting. And then if I go on Yandex or Quant, there's still that same issue where there's like 2 videos. So this is part, and I want people just to be aware of this because it made me aware of it, that you should be using different search engines when you're searching for something. Because if you're trying to find, for example, Frank, and you want to look up his thing, there will come a time where he's not going to appear at all on some of these different search engines. And then you'll have to maybe find him over here. So I just wanted to put that out there because I did the research the other day and I was like, wow, okay, this is why people can't find our page because it's no longer listed in the same fashion. And all of the content that me and you are doing right now of video is just impossible to find. And I realized, wow, we talk for hours, but it's challenging for people to find. But unless you know that things are changing, and it started changing in about March, I realized. March of 2024, they started changing a lot, and it's accelerated from there. And this is kind of why they want the AI with the searching, so that people get the searches of AI instead and don't start looking around on different platforms. So that's a different rabbit hole for another day, but I thank you for having me on. We always have a blast. We talk about a billion different topics, and it's always a great one.
Yeah, and I'll start setting aside all these questions and these. I mean, we're in the best time of year for for spooky stuff. So maybe I even I bring you back on in November, and we'll get into some hidden history, and we'll have we'll try to blow some minds out there. But thank you so much, Matt. All the best to you and yours, and stay cool out there in the 110-degree heat.
I'll be tanning. That's what I'll be doing.
Oh, man, I miss it already. Take care.
I'll see you, brother.
See you later. Tanning. Oh, that was part of my healthcare protocol for this summer, and it was so good. Just go outside, work in the yard, do something, clean something up, or just sit there for 10 minutes. And now I feel like I haven't felt the sun in forever. It's gone. It's just gone. So what'd you think about that? It's 8:33. I guess we'll go on a really quick break. When we come back, I'm just going to throw the lines open, because in about 20 minutes, we're going to cut off and we're going to prepare a watch party stream on quitefrankly.tv for the VP debate. But I'm going to have the inside information hotline that is open. The inside info hotline is 914-369-1236. Everybody else goes to 914-200-0269. That's the open line. But this is very specific stuff. And like I said, something you watched on a BitChute video is not inside information. So, if I see that ringing, I know that we've got a big fish on a hook. All right. We'll be right back. Thanks again to Matt from Cultivate Elevate. Always illuminating. I want to thank my wonderful and very necessary sponsors, Blue Monster Prep. Go to bluemonsterprep.com to look into everything you may need, from communication to emergency food, water, first aid kits, flood, lighting, PPE, sanitation, security, shelter and sleeping, solar, survival kits to make sure that you are ready for anything. So bluemonsterprep.com. You got to go check them out.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button.
Quite frankly.
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 Quite frankly. Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly, guys.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
So everybody watch, quite frankly, with Frank.
That's number one. I'm gonna go to the inside information hotline in just a second. I actually see a couple people trying to call in. Stick with it. Real quick though, because we don't have that much time in the second half. More than 100 people could accuse Sean Diddy Combs of sexual abuse in lawsuits, and here's a look at the allegations. Are you ready for this? This is from Forbes. Rapper Sean Diddy Combs could be accused of sexual abuse and exploitation by more than 100 people. I heard it's 120, around there. In a series of lawsuits expected to be filed in various states over the next 30 days, an attorney for the accusers announced on Tuesday. The latest among numerous similar civil lawsuits pending against the music mogul as he awaits trial following a high-profile indictment this month. Here's from today. Houston-based lawyer Tony Busby said he is representing 120 accusers who plan to file civil lawsuits across multiple states alleging crimes like sexual lawsuit, rape, and sexual abuse of minors, and claims that it will include many powerful people and many dirty secrets. Those are two quotes. Many powerful people, many dirty secrets. Oh, well, I'd love to see it. Wouldn't you? I'd love to see it, but that's all I can say. It's usually not our will that is done. I got a text from Frank and Jim Zell on this story. Jim said, I foresee this headline. Tony Busby has been found dead in his garage, hanging from the ceiling. Authorities have ruled it a home accident. Then Frank followed it up and said, authorities have ruled the hanging a diabetes-related hanging. Yes, the diabetes made me do it. I mean, geez. Actually, here it is. Here's the Tony Busby guy. We'll get to that in a second. Inside information hotline is hot. 914-369-1236. Oh, there's so much more I can do right now. Those other callers, they disappeared. So we'll see if they come back. And if they do, I'll be ready to catch them. I just did not want to leave that off. Yes, indeed. What else do we have? Yeah, never mind. Let me get to this before I lose him again. All right. Inside information hotline. I don't want to know your name, and I won't say your number. It's just you and me and a bunch of other people. What do you got for us?
What up, Francis? It's Frankie.
Oh, hey, what's going on, Frankie?
So I'm gonna try and keep it nice and calm because usually I get all full of energy.
Well, give us your inside information. We don't have that much time.
So I'm a 20-year longshoreman.
Okay, good.
My family actually runs the unions. I'm down in Port Tampa. I used to work at Port Newark. We got to go back to 2018. Everybody remember when the hurricane hit and you had Obama and Christie walking with their hands, holding hands on the beach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we threw a big thing for them, and they promised $90 million from the federal government. It never showed up. About a week later, Bob Menendez comes, brings us about $40 million of that dollars, and he apologizes. Week after that, he's in Newark on federal charges. Everybody can remember that. What's going on, what you don't understand, is that we operate under collective bargaining. And ever since NAFTA happened, you can remember, Frankie, I'll remember, everybody remembers when we were growing up, everything said made in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is they outsourced all of our jobs, okay? All of our warehouses closed. I'm from a place called North Bergen, New Jersey, Hudson County, right outside of Manhattan. We used to be the embroidery capital of the world. Just in our 40 years, we have lost all of our jobs. The only thing that we export is garbage. The only reason why we exported it is because they used to go through everything about us. China is selling our steel twice the price and bringing it back. All of our intellectual property has been stolen. All of our jobs have been stolen. Our politicians are as dirty as can be. This is exactly why Rome fell. Harold Daggett and the ILA is the last of the Mohicans. It's the last great union. I'm telling you that right now because I've been pregnant to a lot of information. I know that our arguments back and forth have been, we'll put a scale onto each one of the cranes, and every container that comes off on a manifest that says 40,000 pounds will show the world that it's really 70,000 pounds. So it's our job and our responsibility to work on these chassis, to work on these cranes, to make sure that these things aren't coming in to harm Americans. I'm telling you now, our food is poisoned. We have stowaways like you wouldn't believe. If you want to look back, look out west. Look at Mitch McConnell. Look at Hillary Clinton. Look at Evergreen.
Okay, Frankie.
The ports are shut down. Go ahead, Frankie.
No, this is a couple of questions real quick. Number one, everything that I've gotten, and we're going to talk a lot about this tomorrow night when with our guest, and then afterwards I'll throw the lines open again. But everything I've gotten out of that union leader, we hear
my godfather. That's my rabbi.
That's your godfather, you say?
Yeah. So listen to me.
So
it's a media push to make him look like a monster. And
but
2000 and go ahead.
No, I see that. I see the questions there. Hey, why are you holding the country hostage and all that stuff? But all I've seen, talked about was not only the money, but also pushing back against automation. There's few people that are talking about what you're saying right here. That this is a chance to try to correct the.
So I got balls. I got balls. I'm saying what people aren't allowed to say. Behind closed doors, you obviously know there's two Americas: the United States of America Corporation, and then there's those patriots. Some of us who will never get on their knees. One of them, which is Harold Daggett, and which would sell out the American workforce, like most of these people have done here. What is happening? And if you go, what you need to do, Frankie, is do a deep dive on who Harold is. You'll find out that the other families were trying to put his life at jeopardy, tried to blow his brains out. When he escaped, he ran out, and the federal government locked him up for 4 years. When you do your research on who we are and what we stand for, that'll start making it clear why these corporations hate us. This does have to do with collective bargaining, yes. That's the contract. That's what we signed. We have been working as they've been automating Virginia, D.C., and out west, completely annihilating the workforce. Even worse than that, who's there to check what the hell they're bringing in and what they're bringing out? If you don't think that one of our ports could end up like Beirut, Lebanon, then you're not paying attention. And I know you are. So that's why I decided to open my mouth. As you could hear the shaking in my voice, we don't talk about these things. Start doing a deep dive on who he is. You have my personal information. I'll give it to you all, brother, because it's people like you that are putting it out in the airwaves, and it's people like us that have the balls to stand up for the last fucking great nation on earth. They're coming for us. And all these ports are shut down. You need to start paying attention. The missiles are flying, they're hitting Israel. This country's up for grabs. We're not going to have a mistake happen that happened in Beirut. It's bigger than anybody knows. I'm out, Frankie.
Okay. Well, hopefully you call in again tomorrow because I still have more questions, but I understand if you want to dip.
Check your email. Check your email.
Okay, I will do.
I'll talk to you personally, and I'll even get you to be able to sit with them. How's that?
Oh, shit. Okay, well, that'd be very interesting. Thank you so much.
Love you, brother. It's our job to make sure while you're driving with your wife and Aurora in that car, that a container that's overweight with an overworked driver doesn't flip over and end your life. We are the last stand, homie. I love you.
All right.
ILA. I'm out.
Love you too. Take care. See, I've seen that. All that's really being reported for the most part is there's a money issue and that there is an automation issue. Now, when it comes to automation, I'm like, all right, well, listen, with something like this, you're talking about our ports. That's a national security issue. You don't want that to be all you don't want that to be all AI. You don't want that to be all robots and a staff of people in a computer room doing all this stuff. So that's one thing where you can say, well, if you're fighting automation, then you're fighting the future, and then this is just going to come for all of us at some point. Now, I know with trucking, I think that the Department of Transportation has already made it pretty clear. Then again, things can change. That trucking that's going to have to continue. There's going to have to be people who understand how to drive these rigs and get them where they're going. It's very specialized work, and I don't see how. I don't know. It's just. Then again, they want robots doing surgery on people, but national security, and that's what our ports are. I can understand what he's talking about. So I see a lot of things here. First of all, I'm already like, unions. What are their purpose right now? And then I have some of these. I don't know. They are making the labor chief seem like a gangster right now. There is that, but I have seen some people say, in roundabout ways and also direct ways, it's not so much about fighting against. It's not the money. Of course, money is always a consideration. It's jobs. It's about American jobs at that. But it's also about what's inside of the crates. He just said stowaways are a big problem. It's not just about stowaways and illegal immigration. It's about human trafficking, too. Now, I would love for a guy as powerful as the Longshoreman Union chief to go out there and say shit like that. Obviously, it might be the end of your life. But from a national security standpoint, I mean, that's everything. It's not even just we've been talking about that since 9/11. The ports, out of all of the containers that come in, how many are actually checked? That's what I would like to know. How many containers are actually checked with the human staff that we have? These are the questions I would have for Frankie if he was still on the air, but I understand dipping in, dipping out. 846, that was a great call on the Inside Information Hotline. I'm fine with that being the only call because I have to set up the other one now too. Okay, so we got that. We got Tony Busby announcing he has a list of names that are going to shock the public. He also announced he has a video evidence of various crimes, including sexual abuse of minors. We'll expose the enablers who enabled this conduct behind closed doors. We will pursue this matter, no matter who the evidence implicates, says Busby. Many powerful people, many dirty secrets, the lawyer said, adding to his team, collected pictures, videos, and texts. The allegations will include violent sexual assault or rape, facilitated sex with a controlled substance, dissemination of video recordings, sexual abuse of minors. It's a long list already, but because of the nature of this case, we are going to make sure, damn sure, that we are right before we do that. These names will shock you. Tony Busby says. We will listen to this tomorrow. Good golly, Miss Molly. I don't know. Man. And there's more. So, again, all the stuff about the importance of Spruce Pine, North Carolina is just it's just incredible. Here's a GLP article from, what was the original one? It harps on some stuff. This is a GLP article from today, or maybe a day or so ago, yesterday. But it pulls on all of these tweets from March of this year. The modern economy. Here's from Ethan Mullick. The modern economy rests on a single road in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. The road runs to two mines that is the sole supplier of the quartz required to make the crucibles needed to refine silicone wafers. There are no alternative sources known from Conway's material world. I mean, that's pretty incredible. North Carolina, the modern economy rests on a single road in Spruce Pine. That and the lithium mines and an operation that was going to expand but had a little bit more, the purest quartz in the world right there. And it took a hurricane for me to find out that it even existed. So, all right, let's see. Tomorrow we're going to have a lot more time for calls, but we're going to also have BCP on in the first half. Just get caught up with him. It's been a while. I don't even know if he's been on the show in 2024 yet. Also, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, there's two things to throw out there. The first book club series, the get together that we're going to have is going to be on Monday the 7th. That is going to be The Swimmer by John Cheever. It is posted on quitefrankly.tv on the forum. If you want to be part of a book club, if you're a sponsor and you want to be part of book club that night, remember, there's no book to buy. I've given you the link. I'm going to give you the link to every last short story that we're reading this month, October 2024. It is in the thread on quitefrankly.tv. It's pinned to the top. The Swimmer, John Cheever. That'll be on Monday night, the 7th. That is also going to be the night that Noor bin Laden comes back on. It's also going to be, because it's the first Monday of the month, it's going to be the publishing night of the third, Quite Frankly, Bulletin, the newsletter. It's going to feature Noor bin Laden. It's going to feature a few other amazing, even I think Velez from Rogue News has some really awesome piece on Jack the Ripper that's going to be in there. A little bit from Matt, a little bit from me, from John Carroll. It's going to be really terrific. All you got to do is become a sponsor of the show for as little as $5 a month through quitefrankly.tv on the Sponsor Us tab or the links that are in the description below. And you get that. Sunday streams, book club, film club is coming in 2025. Those are the universal perks. Okay, there's plenty of specialty stuff on Patreon and Subscribestar, but please be a part of it and get ready for book club. Get ready. And that's what we have. A lot more on that tomorrow. Thank you guys. Oh, let me just make sure I got through all the super chats on Rumble. On Rumble, we have one rant that comes from Stephen Ellis. Says InfoWars without Alex Jones will be like Project Veritas without James O'Keefe. Yeah, but is Media Matters looking to take InfoWars as a brand and repurpose it? Or are they just taking the studio and the chairs and the computers and the archives and all that stuff, and they're, I don't know, and just sitting on it? Is this real life? Says Frank you. Thank you, Frank. Great show as always. Always love Matt. You are a blessing and definitely a shelter for us Franklies during such tenuous times. God bless you. And ST, YouTube. Oh, that's ST on YouTube, and TTRL on Rumble. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right, and Grace Fedved on QuiteFranklySuperChat.com says, hi, Frank. I'm from the WNC in Waynesville. I'm from WNC, West North Carolina. Like your caller yesterday, but now live in Raleigh. I have many friends and family impacted by the storm. Their main problem right now is no power and surgeries are being delayed. But parts of Waynesville are washed away. Yeah. Well, you guys gave me what was that ministries last night? Grindstone Ministries. Like I said, whatever essentially what was the sum total of all the super chats I got last night, I sent to Grindstone Ministries, like I told you I would. And thank you for, I know right now the real big thing is just try to give to efforts that are as local as possible, because you go to one big place or another, and it's just like out of every $1 bill, 3 cents gets to exactly what you want it to go to. I hear that all the time. So I guess that is just a rule of thumb. Try to contribute as locally as possible. And there you have it. And tomorrow we'll get together and we'll talk about what we see on this VP debate that's going to start in a few minutes. Go to quitefrankly.tv. We're going to do the watch party there. No commentary. Just going to watch it together. You can get into the chat room and hang out. Thank you, Delona. Thank you, Joe Elaine. Says, hope you had a wonderful retreat. Thank you. I did. We'll be talking about that on Thursday with Jay Gulanello here. C. Blanche, no wonder we're pissed. And Robert Sarnes and Sean Joe. All right. That's it for tonight. Thank you so much, ladies and gents, and we'll see you tomorrow.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Think about it, though, Tom. So weight loss.
AIDS? Nobody's got AIDS. I don't want to hear that word here again.
Will you shut up?